What's up, MMA fans on YouTube? I'm going to come do UFC 75 post-fight, and what can you say? It was a crazy night. Always good to get free MMA, but a crazy night of fights. Some real frivolous things going on. Definitely, you guys know what I'm talking about, but I'm going to do the post-fight, and we'll eventually get to that. First fight we got to see was Alessio Sakara against Houston Alexander, and pretty much right from the get-go, both guys come out, let their hands go. Houston up against the fence looking for a good clinch, landed a few grazing knees at earlier instances in the fight, and then eventually Alessio just caught one flush, and just sort of like I predicted, but not quite, but sort of like I predicted. I just felt like Houston just seemed to, in his just one fight, persevere in adversity, whereas Alessio seems to wilt during adversity, and he did during that instance. Got caught with a big knee, and Houston went into his guard and just immediately postured up and rained down the punches and finished the fight. Another first round knockout for Houston Alexander, so he's 2-0 in the UFC. He's got a lot of momentum. First Keith Jardine, now Alessio Sakara, so we'll see him in with a bigger name next time, and maybe he'll get a little more octagon time, because I think that's the true test of a fighter, is when they get into those deep waters and they're fighting the late third, late second round, and they're tired, and you start to see the true mettle of a fighter. And I think that we've yet to see that from Houston Alexander, but nevertheless he still won both of his fights, so good job for him. On to the next fight we got to see, which was Marcus Davis against Paul Taylor. It was a really good fight. Got rocked with that head kick. Oof, quite off the bat. You don't see Marcus Davis get rocked, and he recovered well, was able to scramble up and eventually get the fight to the ground and start working from side control, and eventually get the mount. And from there he was working pretty good, and then he got reversed by Taylor, and he showed some very improved grappling skills, because he made a nice switch into an armbar. That was a really nice transition into an armbar. And if you look at Marcus Davis's record, he's really improved his submission game. I believe he's won at least 4 or 5 of his last fights via the submission. So what was once a much scrutinized part of his game looks like it's becoming a strength. Looked like it was going to be a stand-up war from the start with both guys' credentials, but Marcus took the win where he could get it, and another big win for him. I believe he's on a 10-fight winning streak right now, so he's a guy capable of cutting down to 155 or staying at 170, so he's a really a nice piece in that UFC welterweight or lightweight division. Big win for him. Now on to the next fight we got to see, Mirko Cro Cop against Czech Congo, and man, I mean, it doesn't look like Cro Cop is the same guy anymore, unfortunately. You don't win mixed martial arts fights backing up, and anytime we've ever seen Cro Cop have to back up, the Mark Hunt fight comes to mind, Fedor comes to mind. Anytime he's been forced to back up, he loses the fight. When the other guy puts pressure, it just seems to frustrate him, because he seems the one that likes to stalk. In the first round he was doing that, he was the aggressor, he was moving forward, and then Czech implemented a smart game plan. He would clinch, would stay just active enough not to get split up, and even in a few instances took the fight to the ground. I believe in the second and the third. The first, Cro Cop finished the first round on the ground in the mount, and I thought that he really had an advantage in that area, because we've seen Czech in the past, he's very easy to take down, but then again, Cro Cop is nobody's grappler, and the second and third were kind of just mirror images of each other. Cro Cop pretty much didn't do anything except go for a few body kicks, winged a few head kicks. Czech was mixing it up a little bit better, not terribly great, but throwing some good combinations, and then clinching and taking the fight to the ground. And he won a very obvious unanimous decision. And wow, what do you expect? It was a matchup that looked like it was tailor-made for Cro Cop to win. Now he loses again. I don't think he'll be fighting in England anytime soon, because he's 0-2 there. Definitely don't think he's going to have good karma going back there to fight again. So we'll see what happens with him. He's got 3 more fights on his UFC contract. Definitely could get into the title picture, so he's got to get some wins though. Czech Congo wins, but if he goes up against a fighter that's a good grappler and he's going to lose. We've seen it with, Carmelo Marrero, who's a 205er now, and not the best in the world. Even Osorio Silva took him down with relative ease. He was just able to pepper Silva with punches, but we'll see what happens with Congo, and it's the really Krokop didn't lose devastating as he did with Gonzaga, but this has to be equally as disappointing to just come out after that loss and then just put on a 3-round disappointment like that. But I thought he did the wrong thing in his training by bringing in strikers, and instead I think he should have brought in more grapplers, more wrestlers, so he could eventually take Congo to the ground and finish him. It's funny how a guy could dominate Josh Barnett and then go lose against Chet Congo. It just boggles the mind, but hell, this is MMA, so we'll see what happens. Now on to the next fight we got to see. Michael the Count Bisping against Matt the Hammer Hamill. This had to be the ugliest, one of the darkest days in UFC recent history. And I'm not even gonna do a post fight. We all saw the fight. Hamill backing up Bisping, Bisping just winging the combinations, looking for a big right, didn't land it. He was cut under both eyes. Hamill had numerous takedowns, controlled the fight, and in no instance did Bisping do anything to show that he had won the fight. And it even makes it more interesting because one judge had it 29-28 Bisping. Well, two judges obviously had it 29-28 Bisping, but one judge had it 30-27 Hamill. And obviously he was the only judge that was scoring the fight. And Cecil Peoples, I'm sorry, that is the most disgusting decision, hometown call I've ever seen in my life. That was just highway robbery right there. Matt Hamill got robbed tonight. He really got robbed. And this is the kind of shit you don't want to see. Pardon my language. You don't want to see MMA turn into boxing where guys get robbed on hometown decisions like this. That was just an abomination. If this fight would have been fought anywhere else, Matt Hamill would have won an obvious unanimous decision. And one judge, thankfully, was watching the fight and had it called perfectly, 30-27. The other judges, I'm sorry, I'm going to use some more harsh words again, had their heads up their ass and decided just to go with the popular vote and go 29-28 Bisping. Because you know what, if they could have, they would have gone 30-27, but it was so obvious that he had lost the fight, I think they would have been shot. Because that was disgusting, unbelievable. That was just horrible. Horrible decision. That was just disgusting. He basically won the fight because he was fighting in his home country. No other reason. And in further jest of Bisping, if he fights a more well-rounded, a more let's just say a more Matt Hamill's had 6 fights in mixed martial arts. If he fights anybody, even along the lines of a Stephan Bonner or a Forrest Griffin, he's going to get his ass whipped. I'm sorry. Bisping just did not look impressive tonight. And in his last fights, I mean, Eric Schaefer, Josh Haynes, Elvis Sinisek, who loses to everybody these days, I mean, his body of work hasn't been that impressive. He's sort of like a baby boxer now who's fighting at home, padding an undefeated record. He's getting the preferential treatment. Now I think it's time. Let him fight Houston Alexander, and then I think we'll see what'll happen to Michael Bisping. But sorry about the little rant, but it was a horrible. And then again, it's not Bisping's fault either. It's true, it's not his fault, but it's just a highway robbery. And I think if he would have had, at least a little bit of gumption, he would have said, "Look, I don't think I won that fight," or just said it was really close. It could have been a draw. He could have done something like that. He kind of just ran with it and said, "I won the fight." He didn't win the fight, not at all. Okay, on to the main event. Champion versus champion, first time we've ever seen it. Quentin Rampage Jackson versus Dan Henderson, and I should have went with my gut in the beginning, and I really, as the fight got closer and closer, I really felt like it was going to be what it turned out to be, which was a war of attrition. Two guys with very, very similar styles, just brawlers, really like to swing the leather, and they did just that, and then go to the ground and get some takedowns. And through the first 3, the whole fight, it was just that. It was just an exchange of really good takedowns, some good combinations, and Dan won the first round, I felt, with his clinch game against the fence, got the takedown, was in some dominant position, was able to, really use the cage to his advantage, which was he hasn't been in a cage in a very, very long time, well, at least in a real fight, and he posed very, very well in a cage. He looked great with the cage tactics, the clinch against the fence, and I didn't understand why Quinton kept going in that direction with him. He would press him up against, and then Dan would reverse, and eventually, in most instances, get a takedown. But Quinton, when he was at distance, was a little bit crisper. But if you hit Dan hard, he's going to come back and try to hit you just as hard. It just seems like he's impossible to. You can rock him just a little bit, but it just seems to wake him up and make him want to come after you. So Quinton had a really good quote at the end of the fight. I didn't know I was going to end up injured, he said something to the effect of him using I didn't know I was going to injure my hand on his face or something like that. It was kind of funny what he said, like Quinton always is. And all 5 rounds were pretty much the same. It was just a lot of good exchanges, a lot of good scrambles on the ground. Quinton was able to kind of, gain the advantage with I believe in the 3rd and 4th rounds when he was on top most of those rounds, raining down punches, and then Dan in the 4th was able to get into Quinton's guard, do a little bit of work, but then was reversed and seemed like at the end of the 5th round, Quinton had a good thing going. I thought he had rocked Dan. He had him up against the fence, was throwing leather, and then obviously the round was over, and Quinton won a close 5-round decision. And if I expected it, if it was going to go to the scorecards, Quinton was going to get the decision, and he did. It was a really close fight, razor thin, but Dan is still, you can't take nothing away from him. You put him in the cage with anybody, he's going to give them a hell of a fight. Even heavyweights, I mean, the guy is unbelievable. If he does go down to 185, I really feel bad for the UFC the UFC middleweights, because he is a nightmare matchup for anybody in that weight class. That includes the seemingly everybody thinks invincible Anderson Silva and Rich Franklin. It does not bode well for those guys if Dan goes down to that weight class, because he's gonna wreck it. Period. Unfortunately, but he's definitely that good, and he can give any 205er a hard fight, as we saw tonight, any day of the week. He could definitely go in there and beat any legit elite 205er on any given night. So with that being said, I hope you guys all enjoyed the segment. It was really unfortunate the way that the event went tonight, to see it. Just a horrible decision, just a hometown call basically. And until then, you guys have a good one. Take care. I'll be doing we got a Elite XC show coming up this weekend. Following week we've got UFC 76. Then in between there we have UFC Fight Night. So a lot of good stuff going on. Until then, you guys have a good one. Take care. I can't wait to hear what you guys thought about the show and all your comments and whatnot. Have a good weekend.